Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the 1993-94 Score hockey set. This is an unusual year. 1993 is an unusual year for Score because it's the year that they did the same design for every single sport. Okay, they did it again in 1998, but when Score launched in 1988, the standard was that all four sports used different card borders for each sport. Because, Topps did it. Although, to be fair, Fleer also did the same thing. Fleer had their baseball cards, they also had their basketball cards, and they had their football cards. So really, the tradition was in place from two different companies that you used different card designs for each individual sport. So in 1989, it was a no-brainer for Score to use a different card design for their 1989 football release. And in 1990, when they added hockey to the mix, well, again, different card border. 91, the same thing. 92, the same thing. But in 1993, they pulled back and they used the same design for all three sports, which fell in line with what Topps started doing in 1991 and was continuing to do through 1993. And admittedly, even Pro Set did it in late 1992. So it's not that it was without precedent, but it was still unusual to shift over to using a single card border across all three sports. Unless you were doing premium cards, because Pinnacle and Ultra were both using the same card design across all the different sports. So, okay, that made sense. Even Select in 1993 was designed in pretty much the same way, just with different color borders between baseball and football. So the fact that they shifted over to using a single card design for all three sports was an interesting move, but even more interesting because the fact that in 1994, or even, technically it was completely in 1994, they went back to using different borders for the different sports. So this was a brief window of time when Score would use the same border design in each sport, and it was a good border to use for this because they had a very simple border that was built around just having some team color on it. You have a white border and then an inner half-size border with two team colors. You have a main color and then there's a box with the position letters on it that's another color, and then there's a white box at the bottom which just expands the bottom area open so that the player's name can show up there. Very basic card design, and then you just allow the image to read. But the way that this border was designed, it actually did work almost equally well between each of the three different sports. So it was well done. But what's really interesting about this border design is the fact that on the card back, they actually have that same design that's echoed on it, which is an incredibly unusual thing to see. The design of a card used on both the front as well as on the back. And it was done in a way that you almost wouldn't even notice. So really well designed cards. They did have rookies that were basically the exact same card. They just have a little rookie logo that is, well, you get extra credit if you can figure out where on this card the logo is. It's a logo that can easily get lost on the card because of how busy the back is, but also because the logo is not very distinct. So here on Lang's card, it just completely disappears into the card, but I assure you the logo is there somewhere if I can remember where it's at. They did have a couple of subsets and some standalone cards again. And it starts off with a tradition that they were doing up until this point, which is that, look, it's the early 90s and the NHL was adding teams basically every single year. And here for 1993, we got cards honoring the addition of the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, as well as the Florida Panthers. And for those following along at home, that means that these two teams brought us up to 3 teams in California and 2 in Florida. Imagine 5 years earlier telling somebody in a league that only had the Kings south of the Mason-Dixon line, telling them that, hey, guess what? We're in just 5 years going to have 5 teams across California and Florida. It's pretty mind-numbing to see just how quick they were to expand the league down into these different areas. And then they have their first subset in this set, which is called Little Big Men. And this is about as boxy and clunky of a card as you're going to find. Just a black box at the bottom, a logo for Little Big Men stuffed up at the top, and nothing else going on. For Score, this is a really unusually boxy card, and I would basically advise that you look at the card back, because the card back looks a lot better than the card front. I don't know, especially in this card set, with what we're about to see, I don't know why they came up with this, because when you shift over to Season Leaders, you see that this is the complete opposite. This carries on the tradition from starting in 1990, where they had some really, really impressive backgrounds that they stuck behind the player. Especially in this case with the green on black background that is just gorgeous, the way that it looks. And it very much has a 1990-91 Skybox basketball look to it. Although I do have to say there's some people who don't like the 90-91 Skybox basketball cards because of the players floating in air. Well, if they don't like those, they're really going to be bothered by how the players show up on these cards, because with those ice skates, it really does look strange. So in the case of people who have a tough time with this, I would advise that they just keep moving on and go over to the Season Highlights cards, where these are just wonderfully crafted cards. The rich design of it with really nice colors, the design features that give interest to the border, and then that wonderful light glisten right in the middle up at the top makes these cards look really exquisite and unusually good for inside of a Score set. Really nice cards. And then they do have two other cards worth noting, which is that one is they like to do their Stanley Cup cards every year. And so here for the 1993 set, the Montreal Canadiens were the team that was able to win it. And for this, I got to note that this was back in the time when Canadian teams still had a viable chance of making the Stanley Cup. It would be a lot harder in the years to come, but it is fun to still see a time when this was considered more of the normal as opposed to the exception. But they also continued to do their Memorial Cup, and in this case, for 1993, the winners of the Memorial Cup were the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. And this is such a great tradition that Score was adding these teams into the set and giving you a little bit of a feel outside of the main NHL presence here in this card set. But that's the end of Series 1, and I have to distinguish that it's the end of Series 1 because when we move on to Series 2, you'll notice right away that there's something different, which is literally everything. I mean, this is a card that you would look at and your first instinct is, but that's got to be another year. And okay, to be fair, yes, this is the 94 side of the 93-94 set, but it's not from a different year, a different card year. It is the extension of what we were just looking at. Next question, okay, so is that the Canadian version? Well, maybe it is. I mean, the Canadian cards are identical to the US cards. There's no difference between them except for the text on the back. The fact is that Series 2 was done in a completely different way than Series 1. 1992 Pro Set Football had done this, and these two sets are just about the only place you're ever going to find a Series 1 and a Series 2 that look nothing alike. Here they have a wonderful blue color with a marble or ice design in it. And then down below at the bottom, they have a wonderful design for the player name and for the logo. Just gorgeous cards. And really what they were doing was they were practicing for their upcoming baseball set. So that's why the cards look so wildly different. But also, along the same lines, the baseball set had a parallel, which is called Gold Rush. Well, we got that here as well. So the Gold Rush cards are a chrome mirror finish on the entire surface of the card. They replace the blue with gold, and then they have a Gold Rush logo on the front, Gold Rush logo on the back. All of the cards in Series 2 have this parallel. None of the cards in Series 1 have the parallel, so it's only Series 2. And they didn't bother with subsets, but they did go ahead and throw a Wayne Gretzky card in here because, look, it's Wayne Gretzky. Every year he does something special. So what's this big whoop-de-doo special thing that he happened to do for the 1993-94 Series 2? Okay, he became the all-time scoring leader for the NHL. All right, I guess that's worthy of having a standalone card. This card is a part of the set. It's not an SP, nothing special, just a card in the set. Does have the parallel as well, so the cards come both with regular and then the parallel also can be found with the cards. And that's the set. Only, I got to note something, which is that when I was showing you the main card in the set, I was showing you Alexander Daigle. And that's a bit misleading because while the card is identical to the rest of the cards in the set, Daigle himself was not included in packs. That particular card number did not appear in packs. Instead, they had a redemption card. And if you got the redemption card, you could send it in and get the Alexander Daigle card later on. So that means that the Daigle card that you were looking at is actually an SP card that is not a part of the set. Numerically it is, but in terms of a complete set, the set is considered complete without the card because, again, you couldn't get the card in packs. You had to send away to get it. But speaking of inserts, we also had an SP card of Eric Lindros' first All-Star Game appearance. And this was significant for Score because Score had been following Eric his entire career. Right from the beginning of Score showing up in hockey, they started making cards of Eric Lindros, and now Eric Lindros is all grown up and he's off on his own with his own NHL team, and he's even made the All-Star Game for the first time. So they wanted to honor this, and they included an insert card, or an SP card, that's really quite rare in packs. So this is a card that's quite valuable. But that finally brings us to the inserts. And thankfully, there are only 4 inserts to talk about. There are kind of 5 inserts, but at any rate, the first insert set is Dream Team. And you might notice right from the outset that this does not look anything like any other Dream Team cards. This design looks more like a 1991 Pinnacle card. It looks really good for an insert. It's just that this doesn't follow at all with the spirit of Dream Team cards in the years leading up to here. So, gorgeous. The 2 shots is great. The boxy structure of it is good. Gold foil, love all of that. It's just that you got to know that, yes, this is, in fact, 1993 Dream Team hockey cards. This is the way they designed it. They also had a set called Dynamic Duos. Now, Dynamic Duos is an almost square picture up at the top, and then it has a box down at the bottom with a player name in it with the team colors. And then they have a gold banner hanging down on one side that says Dynamic Duos, and you'll also notice that on the other side, well, it has a teammate. And that's the whole point. It's a small card set looking at 2 different teammates. So every single card has a different color theme at the bottom for whichever team happens to be on that particular card. And you'll also notice there's one other thing interesting about this card, which is that up at the top they have a Canadian maple leaf. And the reason is because what we're looking at is a Canadian card. They also come with a blue star for the US release. So in Canadian packs they had the Canadian cards, and then in the US packs they had the US cards. And this is just the US teams. That's the only difference. There's no design difference on the card. It's only the leaf or the star, that whichever one shows up. Even the card numbers are repeated. So that means there are twice as many of these cards, and if you're trying to complete the set, you need to pay attention to the leaf and the star and figure out which one is which, because the numbers are just going to overlap, and there's no otherwise design feature on it to let you know which is which, because every single card is designed around the color theme of the team, not of the set. And then they have an insert set that was used in multiple sports, which is the franchise. And this is a card where they almost completely blacked out the background behind the player. You can still see it ghosted in there, but because it's so dark, it allows for the player to just come right out and be strong. But also the logo for the franchise is really strong as well, which makes the card in certain conditions look almost kind of cheap because it doesn't really work well with a black background, but they darkened it. So when you can kind of see the background, it helps a bit. But it's kind of a weird card, but it's definitely a distinct one, albeit a distinct card that shows up in all 3 sports. What definitely did not show up in all 3 sports was the last insert set called International Stars. And this is a full bleed card with a logo floating in space for Score, gold foil letters up at the top saying International Stars, and then down at the bottom they have a ribbon for the player name that has 2 colors, and those colors are related to whatever nationality he is. On the back they have the full-blown flag showing up. So this is a card that does a wonderful job of continuing a tradition that I've always loved about hockey, which is that hockey is a more international sport than any of the other of the three main U.S. sports. Basketball definitely has a strong international makeup of it, although at this point it was still a lot more formative. But in hockey, there was such a strong presence of Northern European teams that the tradition of really showing that off is a tradition that's just really wonderful. And this is a card that fits into that tradition. And that is the set. So obviously they were starting to build up for their 1994 release, because the Series 2 for 1993 was basically the warm-up act for the 1994 baseball set, which is when they would get back into doing different set designs for each individual sport. This obviously is how they approached 1993 here at that transition point. So I'm going to look at the 94 hockey set later on. I'm not excited to get into it because I don't think it's a very good one, but we will be getting into that in a separate video. I've already done the 90, 91, and 92 sets in previous videos, so if you want to go check those out, if you haven't already, definitely do so. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I do urge you to do so, and thank you very much for watching.